So there's been some talk lately about how Elden Ring's more vague, pro exploration and discovery approach to open world content is showing just how far gone Ubisoft's more open world formula has gotten. Now, personally, I love open world games. And at the forefront of my reasoning is that you get more bang for your buck when you're playing an open world game versus a more linear experience. It's not to say that games with a clear through line don't have experiences worth repeating. I've replayed games many times, but it's just that you are guaranteed to get more out of a sandbox or an open world playground than you could doing a campaign. And some of these campaigns in games today are really short, like maybe 6 to 10 hours. So, there was a time actually where I actually only felt comfortable buying digitally if it was an open world game. One you could sink your teeth into, but like for short campaign shooter kind of games, or maybe these yearly release sports games and shooters, or more linear story driven games, I would actually buy the physical copy and then trade it in for something else later because it was done. It was one and done, a lot of those games. But when it comes to open world, you can kind of enjoy it a little bit more. You get, if I can spend like 30 to 60 hours in the game, that to me is worth it. And so that's why if I felt like I was never going to sell that game or had to sell it or worry about selling it, then I would buy it digitally. But, when I think back on open world games like Infamous, GTA, Red Dead Redemption, Saints Row, the old school ones, I think back on them fondly, actually. And I think of them as really top tier, enjoyable game experiences from back in the day. And games were not that like great back then. When the first GTA 3 came out, that was amazing. So it was the sequels, Vice City, San Andreas. I really loved those games, and I spent so much time in them. And back then there wasn't a lot of like time you could spend on the internet just like talking to people and doing things. A lot of the time you spent was kind of like in these games, doing the stuff. You had like messenger chats. You never really had a lot of the real time interaction with people that you have now. And so these games were really, they're just really a good place to spend a lot of time in. And it was okay to do that, I think, because it was fun. Which is why it's sad how incredibly tedious, formulaic, and repetitive some of these sequels have gotten. Sequels to those games. And I think they're awful, and I think they're getting worse. Now, I liked, was that Assassin's Creed Origins? And I liked it just purely kind of as a tourist in a period piece. I like Egypt, but, I hate just how gamified it became, the optional map markers, And I guess Assassin's Creed was kind of always like that. But I think it got worse in Odyssey. That's the Greek one, right? Where everything was spread further apart. You had to travel through these vast mountain ranges. You had to go on these long, like boat rides to get to all these little, just annoying map markers that you had to clear. And I think that's the game. That's the game really that killed my completionist, my inner completionist. And I used to be a completionist a long time ago, mainly because of games like Final Fantasy. Used to play, you had to get all these hidden materials in Final Fantasy VII and stuff. So eventually you kind of just realize after playing a game that wastes so much of your time that you just don't have time for it. And it gets to a point where these gamified features they interfere with actual gameplay, and it's to the point where you don't have fun playing. And gaming will accept, yeah, the game you'll either focus on a good story or a good game, and if you're lucky, you'll get both. But it's also weird when you're playing these games and it's so tedious that the gameplay or the gamification of it gets in the way of the gameplay being fun, gets in the way of you enjoying the story. You ever play a game where you're like, I hate this game, but I want to know what happens next? I mean, that's just a bad experience when you think about it. At that point, why wouldn't you just watch a streamer play that game? Why wouldn't you just watch it on YouTube? Hey, maybe some of those games make for good streaming content, and maybe that's free publicity, and maybe it's better to get publicity the other way. But you're training people to really not understand how to enjoy games like fully. And what does it say about a game where someone would rather watch someone else play than play it themselves? I think about massively multiplayer online role playing games, MMOs, MMORPGs. A lot of these games early on had story that was imagined. In Ragnarok, I remember wandering after being thrust into this game. You start in this town called Islud, and you travel across these maps, and they're really dangerous. But you're trying to get to another place and just explore, and it's really you can die at any point. There was no quest; they didn't really tell you where to go, and you were just like saying, "Hey, I'm gonna be a knight," and that's it. And you talk to random people you met along the way, and some of those people were just sitting in the middle of these dangerous places and just talking to each other because there wasn't a quest. There wasn't any pressure to do anything. You made up the story yourself, and you were dumped into the world, and there were bosses and challenges and loot, and they were just there. There was no reasoning behind it. But eventually, people got tired of grinding blindly, and there were quests and stories put into these MMOs. And it was good to take away from the blind grinding. You learn, you got to do these quests, you learned about the world, and it was an easy way for people to know where to go next. Because you had these quest chains that led you to clearing a whole area of quests, and then you knew where to go next. And so it was very like it was more like a game that guided you towards the end. Although, one could say there's value to just sticking around in a place and not having the whole world explored and just doing it on your own time. And then someone randomly showing up, hey, have you been to this place? Let me go there with you. But, yeah, exploring those old worlds are fun. But at some point, putting in too many of these quests and stuff, maybe you felt you were doing it because you were addicted, or you felt obligated to clear out these quest markers because of OCD, or because you paid a subscription or invested in your character. Or, yeah, you could just be a completionist as well, and you just felt like you had to do every single quest. But you didn't really enjoy it. And the games went these ways. And I don't really understand why. And the reason I'm going on this tangent as well is because these features, they started appearing in non-MMO games. Like Kingdoms of Amalur was basically a single-player MMO. And every now and then, like, you have a new game coming out. And even shooters, like Destiny, they're becoming RPGs, really. And I don't think it's in a good way, because, like, you dropped into this, and you should be absorbing the world in a blind way, doing just independent exploration, just enjoying it, being free to do that. That's what it means to role play, really. It's just to freely explore things and not be limited. But now it's kind of like you get these cues and you know where to go and what to do, and you're basically just a task completer. You're a guy who's given these tasks and you're supposed to complete them. I had this argument with my students recently about how excited they were. They were like saying, "Hey, have you heard about this?" They were so excited that the future was going to come down to this digital war between closed off virtual reality megaverse, where everyone sits at home in their headsets, their chairs, and they don't go anywhere except in the metaverse, versus something more like an augmented reality version of the real world, where Google or Apple or something, and they have all these pop-ups in real life, and you're wearing these goggles, and you get these gamified features in your AR goggles. And I was just like, none of that sounds desirable, guys. all I could really say was like, what a great, useful way to become a public servant. You're training to be an adventurer in all these games in a way, right? But if you're you're doing this in real life, it's almost like being an odd jobs door dasher when you think about it. You can go do personal quests for people. This guy needs diapers. Yeah, sure. Or if you're doing the Mark Zuckerberg version of the metaverse, you're gonna sit at home and remote control a robot to make burgers for 4 hours. What a way to live. You're not gonna meet people. You're not gonna see them face to face. You're not gonna learn anything about your coworkers that have these fun stories. I mean, maybe you will, but it would be extremely streamlined because you can only work within the confines of what someone programs something to be able to do. Now, people are creative and they get around that. But my problem with like Facebook buying Oculus and doing their metaverse kind of thing is that they completely lock that thing down. They shut off like ingenuity. In the first, I had the original Oculus Rift dev kit, and in the first version of it, It was basically a secondary monitor with a panel in between it, and you could use it as a secondary monitor. But in the Facebook version, it needs to log in, it needs to check that you're connected to the Oculus software, so you can't use it for third party applications unless they go through Oculus or use their dev kits or use their SDKs. And it's just like so locked down and not free and not open that you just don't trust Facebook to be in charge of this thing. Because once they have it all locked down, you know that you're going to be playing a game. The billboard is going to be something sold to you personally, or you're going to have a pop up, or you're going to have like playing this story game and your girlfriend's going to break up with you. And the only way to save yourself is to do this DLC, just to buy this extra outfit for her. It's so stupid. And these mundane, repetitive tasks that we're putting, this sprinkling all around this world, it really is the same problem with the Ubisoft formula, isn't it? In Ubisoft games, you like go to 30 different buildings and you either gotta capture it or spray paint it. You gotta unlock this tower. And then when you unlock this tower, what does it do? It reveals the whole area to you. Before it was just blacked out. You had to use your physical uh, perspective to see them building. But now you have your map unlocked. And what does it do? It shows you odd jobs all around that you can do. It has these and the value you get from finish that task, it's like a variable in the game. It gets updated and says you either get a cash reward or some other fake achievement or some number increases, right? It's very different from something like Elden Ring. It's very different from being a nameless wanderer in a strange land. You hear a rumor, you wander somewhere, you stumble upon something. It's not what you were looking for, but it's an epic monster, and then you have to learn to kill it. And that's it. That's it. People loved stuff like that. People love Shadow of the Colossus. It's just boss battles and exploration. By comparison, the Ubisoft formula feels lazy. Now, the main storylines that they do in their games, and some of the few side quests, they're okay. And sometimes it seems like the game gets in the way of enjoying those things. Like Watch Dogs 2, it was kind of fun because the world was one you could actually use as a playground. San Francisco was a good place to play. You blended in. There was optional map markers really, but you didn't have to do them. And a lot of the time actually spent in that game was just photographing stuff, and it was weird stuff too. Like someone spent time to make that world feel alive, and you felt like you could blend in there, and you were invisible, even when you were public enemy number one. Now, by comparison, the game that came after that one, Watch Dogs Legion, it was totally miserable. The story world was the obstacle. Everything felt locked down, whether or not it was. Map markers, repetitive. Side quests, repetitive. And some of those side quests were endlessly repetitive. Like you could recruit people. They were all throwaways, and it was just not fun to play. Nobody cared about the characters or the stories, and nobody cared about uh, what was going on in the story world. Actually, it betrayed what happened in Watch Dogs 2, because you feel like you're gonna get to a better place because of the actions of people. But actually, it just kind of failed. It showed just how much everybody failed because the world just got worse, which is not what anyone wanted. People just wanted to go to a new place. People would want to see like a proper London when you go to London, not some dystopian London that it's like some kind of like weird, what do you even call it? A neo cyberpunk version of V for Vendetta. It doesn't work like that. Nobody cared about it. And I think there's a bigger problem here than just uh, laziness or formula, because I'm thinking about it right now in real time, and I'm thinking that there's a problem in the corporatized game environment. And this comes from my experience working with people, and also even like teaching in this environment as well. Is that everyone has a specific job, right? And I don't care if you're a teacher in these categories or someone who actually works in these categories, but everyone feels like their job is so important. Their task, they feel like they have to infuse it into the game. So you have a UX designer, user experience or UI designer, and they're like, we have to participate. We have to make a UI, and everybody has to experience it the way we think it is because we're the experts. Nobody can question them. But Elden Ring completely smashes those people in the face. The quest designer says, we have to do so and so, and people have to know our quest exists, and they have to find a way to figure it out. We have to put map markers so they know this quest is here. The graphics guy has to use this effect now. We have to put in this area with this kind of scattering, this light, this RTX ray tracing. Sound guy has to do quest where for some reason you become blind and you have to follow the sounds. Everyone wants to infuse their stuff into it, and the game director just lets them do it because they probably don't care about their job. But some of these people, they overemphasize their own importance and expertise, and some don't even realize when they're not necessary, and sometimes it's not necessary. It's the difference between, like, if you're going to go camping or something, you want to rough it, and you improvise on the spot, and you forgot some stuff, so you have to figure out how to do it or live without it. And maybe you tried to make a fire and you thought it was just too much work, and you gave yourself blisters, and so you end up getting a lighter and just lighting it, saying okay. Or you found a guy in another campsite, he gave you a hand, right? But nothing's worse than going to a campsite and then, like, what is it? Hey, there's a walled off area. It's like a kind of barbecue pit already that you gotta make your barbecue there. Yeah, there's a over there's some stalls that you can piss in, right over there. That's where the fishing hole is. And then you have actually lined off stuff. It's like, don't start fires in this part of the forest. There's nothing worse than a gamified world. And so I guess the truth is that people just really got too used to convenience, or maybe they ran out of time, and then the gamers, they just ran out of time. And some people started wanting things too easy. Some people, they just wanted things a little bit too convenient. Or you play a game and you had a character that started from scratch, and you had to build him up. And this was kind of like me in the first Yakuza game. I got Kazuya Kiryu so strong, and then in part two you started over, and you're like, gotta start over. And it's worse to be playing it like in a row rather than coming back to it years later when the sequel actually comes out. But yeah, sometimes that just happens. I guess people people just want things, and they have a low attention span, and then the developers give them what they want, and a lot more people suffer for it because we just get this generic, just rehashed stuff. So I would like to see these things change. Maybe we don't need sequels, but maybe it's an easy way to cash grab, so companies have to do that. Well, who knows? It's not for me to decide, it's for the consumer to decide. And I guess that's pretty much all I have to say about it. So if you like this kind of video, give it a thumbs up. And if you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why, or if you don't want to, that's fine. But if you like this kind of content, give it a subscribe. Let me know that you like it. And if you want notifications, hit the notification bell down below. And other than that, I guess I'll see you in the next video.